Welcome to PhD with Women on IT, Hack the Future. My name is Beata, and today's PhD Positivity Hack Delivered will be by our guest, Diana Florescu. Our topic of today is Venture Building Studios 101, a new model for entrepreneurship. PhD episode 32 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my mojo, and empathy is critical when you're building venture studios, a new model for entrepreneurship. We are going to learn from our expert. So this episode's guest, Diana Florescu, will explain the difference between different organizations dedicated to systematically producing new companies. Diana is a founding member of Grai Ventures, a venture building studio headquartered in Romania. A UCL Entrepreneurship Graduate, she has held various marketing and sales roles, working at all levels up to CEO in the last 7 years. Her projects span multiple sectors, including technology, gaming, consulting, media and entertainment, retail, among others. Diana has owned her global perspectives by working and living in 5 countries, including the UK, USA, Qatar, Germany, and Romania, and recently Warsaw, I believe. Diana, where in the world are you today?
Hi, Beata. It's great to be here. I'm actually back in Bucharest with my family. I was traveling a bit for the last couple of weeks, despite restrictions that we have in Europe right now. So I'm back in Bucharest, but I will be in Warsaw actually next week. So hopefully we'll see each other around.
Fantastic. Make sure you've got warm boots because it's actually freezing here. So,
Yeah.
coming from London, rainy days in London, and now it's actually even colder. So, go figure. We are getting not only the bad weather, but also misery and so on. Anyway,
Yeah,
but
I
let's
packed my
focus.
clothes away. So all the summer clothes are packed. So no worries.
Oh, I
I'm
know.
ready
Hashtag
for,
first world problem.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, at least we've got some clothes to choose from.
That's right.
Anyway, let's go into the topic of entrepreneurship and venture building. Diana, you've been involved in startups, and we actually met at the Wolf Summit
That's right.
last year. Was it last year or 2
It
years
was
ago?
last October, yes. So it's coming up to a year now. That's right.
Fabulous. So, what did you do there, and what can you tell us about what you were doing at that stage?
So with maybe I should start. Thank you so much for the introduction. I don't know what else to add. It sounded like I've been doing a lot of things, but to be honest, the last couple of years I've spent my time in venture building. So at Grai, together with my business partner Stefan, and also with Wolf Summit, which last summer it was initially a temporary engagement. Working alongside Mike, which evolved in a much longer relationship collaboration over the years. So we'll talk about that, about Wolf Summit as well, I hope, during today's discussion. But at that stage last summer with Grai, maybe I should start going back a little to explain what we do at Grai, and what maybe what a venture studio is. So Grai, when we started Grai, Stefan started Grai a few years back. I don't think the concept of venture studio even existed in Romania or even Eastern Europe. So it's a fairly new concept. I think everyone is trying to figure out how the structure really works. And from the very beginning, all our ideas were originating internally. We right now have a team of 8 people that actively work on the companies that we incubate inside Grai. These are ideas that, as I said, originate from problems or opportunities that we see in the market. But last summer, we also thought about kind of spinning out a division, if I can call it this way, focused a lot on working alongside other partners, such as corporations, organizations, or universities. So when we met, we were at a stage of just setting up the structure and the infrastructure of Grai. And now a year forward, a lot of things have happened, and I hope we can talk about that later in the podcast. But essentially, we have our core function of repeating and having this process of building these companies internally. We're incubating a company that spun out of a university. So we have a scientist on board with us. And we are preparing to launch one of our first companies just next month. So many things happened, good things.
Excellent. I am looking forward to see what the company might be. We actually bonded over the fact that we are both working in technology, and we are, one of the few leftovers of whatever men decided to give us, and whatever functions we were given, whatever opportunities we were giving. And we were talking about the fact that the different dynamics play different roles under different jurisdictions or different geographies, scenes. So you told me that it's quite an interesting to be working in different countries. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we deep dive into Venture Studio and touch more on that topic?
Sure. I mean, I've also lived in very different countries from one another, right? So if you take Qatar, I think that's it's a completely different, part of the world compared to the US. So you've got almost 2 countries sitting at opposite poles on a spectrum. I think it's also the nature of the industry. I've always worked very closely with from young to all the professionals, and I've always worked in diverse teams. And I personally, as a woman in tech, I've been exposed to a lot of opportunities, and I never really felt, for example, underrepresented, even though I know there's a lot more we can do, especially in raising investment and startup founders. But in the US, for example, I've worked closely with a couple of partners at that time, the company I was working for, and I've learned a lot from his leadership. Well, in Qatar, I was really exposed to just different mindsets and different ways of working. We had partners in the region that they just had a completely different lifestyle, right? Different principles as well that you have to adapt to. And that really impacted, I think, my emotional intelligence and that flexibility and being able to adapt quickly, which I'm sure we can talk about this later, but this sort of skills are absolutely fundamental. I think as anyone, but especially as a woman in business, being able to grow that resilience, being able to adapt, and have that empathy. I think, as you said as well in the beginning of the talk, I think it's fundamental. I learned that a lot from working in different ecosystems.
Just last week, we talked with Dr. Jackie Taylor, who talked about the empathy economy, how important it is to build the venture that is going to bring social good, and it's not just focused on profits. So tell me a little bit, we touched upon the adapting quickly, and it's critical for any startups. We've been working with startups all over the world. We've had similar experience. You at one stage used to work for a startup bootcamp in London. So it's a very fast-paced environment. So how is venture studio, venture building different to what models are there? So, and maybe you could explain what models are available and what's the difference between the new model.
Sure, and I'll try to keep it short because I think this can last for a while. So maybe before going to the comparison between what's out there and venture studios, maybe just worth trying to share what I understand or how I see a venture studio. And I would say also that there's no such definition of a venture studio. There's no universal way of defining a venture studio, and that's why we've seen a huge, almost an explosion of companies calling themselves venture studios. But to me, a venture building studio really comes down to having a build function attached to a source of capital. Another way of putting this would be to almost think as a venture capital firm that would be building new startups. And venture building studios, they do actually have a pretty fundamental role in the overarching ecosystem of startups, right? So by all means, we're not coming to the market to take over accelerators or push out incubators or trying to, challenge VCs. I think accelerators and incubators, these two are additional forms or adjacent organizational types to venture studios, for example. They are fundamental as well because they paved the way to venture studios, for example, like us, to come into the market. Where with VCs, for example, we look at venture capital firms as partners. And we see that model changing so much as well. So many new, sophisticated, specialized venture capital firms that are coming up on the market to either invest in corporate startups or to actually partner up with venture studios, right? So the fundamental difference, I think, between an accelerator and a venture studio, and I did work in accelerators, you're right, is that a venture studio like Grai, for example, we would go beyond the 3 months of acceleration, right? So an accelerator would have a call for applications, scout many companies. So they would look elsewhere externally from the accelerator. They would place multiple bets on different companies, knowing that most of them will fail. So it's almost like in venture capital, right? And they would be incubated for 3 months. And then there's a demo day at the end. And potentially some of these companies will join the alumni community, where that's all fine. But our approach is fundamentally different. We don't have any call for applications. There's no such external companies or startups that we incubate in our studio. These are ideas that, as I said, originate internally. Of course, we look for very talented entrepreneurs to come and build together on the idea. And we also go beyond that 3 months, right? So for us, there's no time stamp. The moment we build that company stayed with us. We grow it from an ideation stage, validate the business model, iterate, trying to fundraise as well. We don't have a fund right now. However, we have a close network of investors where we can go and invest in the startup. So I think this is really the fundamental difference between the models. And as I said, the model is changing so quickly. So I think it's pretty an exciting space to watch and where this could end up in a decade from now.
Fascinating and good to hear that you're touching upon something that not many people are brave enough to touch upon. You started this venture studio with a couple of partners. Did you team up with like corporates as well? Is there anybody on your team that is supporting or giving ideas to these startups? How does it work with Grai Ventures?
Sure. So right now, so at the very moment, our focus still remains on the internal function of our studio. So these ideas do originate internally, or I mentioned we're seeing opportunities on the market. I I do believe in the power, or if you want, the performance of startups that originate out of a collaboration with an established organization, like a corporation in that regards. I think in Eastern Europe or Central Eastern Europe, the last 9 months for me have been a steep curve, because I've been here where most of the time I'm based in London. So I came down here, spending most of the time in Central Eastern Europe, having endless conversations, plenty of conversations with different corporations. And I feel like the need is there, and the willingness is there, because let's just remember that the idea of creating a startup or a corporate startup really comes out of necessity to try to be more competitive on the market. It's not just doing another hackathon or accelerator. It takes a lot of time, a lot of determination, the buy-in from all the senior people, as well as funding, right? So these are not easy conversations. However, I think corporations in the side of Europe, because already if you look at the UK, Germany, the Nordics, I think the mindset is a bit different. There's been corporations that I also know of that they've done venture building before, internally, externally as well. So these conversations are still going. And I'm really pleased that they're going the right direction. At this very moment, we still focus on our internal function, but also university spin-outs, which I'm sure you probably have heard a lot as well. It's a pretty hot topic, which I think should have got way more attention earlier. But it's fundamental as well to the creation of new startups. There's a lot of extremely talented scientists that what they need business development and that business acumen that a venture studio in our case could provide. So we are happy to be already testing this model. We have one company of such, and I think for the next year or so we'll be focusing most of our efforts on fundraising and building the 3 companies we currently have incubated at Grai.
Well done. Let me remind our community that this is a grassroots organization that focuses on women on IT, and we want to hear your voices. If you have any question, if you want to chip in, any suggestion, please do so, because we want you to succeed. And the mantra of activism is, if nobody says anything, nothing changes. So here is your opportunity to speak to awesome Diana Florescu, to ask her question about entrepreneurship, startups, venture building, venture capital, all the buzzwords of startup world. Diana, let me ask you a very fundamental question. How was it for you to raise capital for your venture, whether it's current venture or previous ventures? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, tough question. I'm trying to, I might not be able to disclose much with Grai, because as I said, we're still very much in that process. But another thing too, I feel like I do need to add this, and maybe, I don't know, maybe because this is my personality, or maybe because I'm also a woman in this topic. But we're still learning a lot, or myself, I'm still learning a lot about the model. So I think by all means, I'm not an expert, and I think it's changing so fast that we're really trying to figure out from things like basic things, right? Like how to structure, for example, a cap table when a startup would have a Grai or another venture studio as an investor and a shareholder in that cap table, or how to choose your legal structure for your fund, speaking about investment, right? Because there's multiple ways of raising money for a studio. Right now, at least we've decided to go with this single studio model and have a direct investment in Grai in exchange for equity for the investors and potentially rights to further invest in our portfolio. It is right to say that we also work alongside companies, external companies, startups that are looking just for fundraising. So we do have a couple of really ambitious entrepreneurs that they validated their concept, or they're even at a much later stage where Grai just joins in to help with that fundraise. I think it's always challenging with fundraising, and of course there's a lot of discussions around the difference between gender, and I'm sure everyone knows the famous article about what questions do female founders get asked by an investor compared to a male founder, for example. I think I would rather not go in that direction. However, I would like to say that it's really encouraging the change I'm seeing, not only on the startups, on the female-led startups that are getting funded, but the wide range of initiatives that I've seen on the market. I was part myself of an organization called Diversity VC last summer. They support diversity and inclusion in venture capital, which I think it's paramount at this time. There's of course women in IT. I think what you're doing, Beata, is great to get visibility on women founders and potentially even get them much closer to investors. But I think the overall market, it just needs to change, and it's not just about gender. I think it's about diversity overall. We're talking about minorities that I think by definition it's a bit harder to get into this space if you're not coming from a privileged background, in my opinion. So we just need to get that visibility across. And I think initiatives like yours are just doing a fantastic job.
Sorry, I just muted myself because we've got a builders working. It's definitely men because they didn't listen to me. I told them not to start drilling, and here you go. We've got some questions coming. One is coming from Olga. Great to see you. Great to see PhD back. What are the particular issues that Romania faces for a venture builder?
I mean, Olga, thanks so much for that question. It's a really good one. I would phrase it this way, or put it in the context of what problems do actually venture builders or venture building studios trying to address. And if we think about the really fast growth of venture studios over the last decade, one of the reasons is because it's trying to tackle the startup failure rate, which is something that, I mean, everyone, obviously, every ecosystem is dealing with, but including Romania. And sometimes some actually Romanian startups, or the average age could even be below the European average. So this is one of the reasons we started at Grai, and that's why we are such a ecosystem player, not just a venture studio. We are part of different organizations such as Startup Grind. So we are trying to address the startup failure rate, which is pretty high. We do believe that the model that we're building right now could potentially help companies reach that seed stage or Series A much faster and with much higher success. At the same time, I think in Romania, we have a quite nascent sort of a market of angel investors. And to get to that really strong market of angel investors, that requires education. That requires more experienced investors sharing their know-how, as well as serial entrepreneurs, for example, exiting their startups, coming back to the market, investing in this company. So essentially, venture building companies could potentially accelerate that race of exit. So then the entrepreneur comes back into the market and further invest. I bet everyone knows UiPath. I was actually looking at the Startup Genome report, which was just released today, and I was really pleased to see Bucharest, the second ecosystem on the top 10 ecosystem in terms of value in the world as a city. And the first place was Detroit, and then Bucharest, and then you had other really great hubs, right? But on the Bucharest. And I think the value, I hope I'm not mistaken, but it was around $38 billion. And fundamentally, UiPath, I think, is probably like 90% of that, right? But that we need that visibility. We need that, the stories of startup founders coming back to invest further in the market. So just to wrap up on that, I would say the startup failure rates is one issue. The investors and the investor readiness to invest, I would say, is the second issue. And then I think it's just the third one, I would say, is not necessarily an issue. It's something that I think can be done better. It's just connecting corporations, universities, industry experts, startups, right? Because that's really fundamental to a venture studio, at least in our case, how we do it at Grai.
I suspect it's also quite tricky when you don't have face-to-face meetings anymore. And before we dive into Ahmad's question and Jamil's question, I would like to ask you, how was it dealing with non-face-to-face meetings? I mean, collaboration, cooperation with different people online is kind of tricky because you have to wait for one person to finish talk, because then nobody can hear when you talk over others, and it's kind of make it like impersonal, more robotic. So how did you tackle that challenge?
I don't know if I tackle the challenge, but we know each other better, and you know how I'm always like hopping on a plane and going somewhere, and I've done it to some extent throughout the pandemic as well. Maybe not as much as I did it before, but anytime I had the opportunity maybe to be with my team, or for example be in Warsaw also with the summit, or having other face-to-face meetings, I've done it. But you're absolutely right. It's been challenging. I think it's not a secret to say that it might even affect your just overall mental well-being. I mean, just staring at a screen for God knows how many hours a day, and I'm doing that for long hours. It's exhausting. And the way I think I'm trying to sort of like hack my own schedule. Speaking about productivity hacks, I'm trying to kind of squeeze all my meetings towards the end of the week, so then I can have plenty of time to like sit down and focus, especially at the start. If we don't need to see each other face to face, we'll just do phone calls, because that really helps sometimes. But I don't think there's such, I think it's a temporary fix, isn't it? I'm really pleased to see that Europe is reopening again, because the one thing, and I think this is also applicable to Wolf Summit, which we're doing it hybrid. So luckily, this upcoming edition is going to be great, and probably the biggest so far. One thing you can't replicate is it's in-person meetings, right? That personal touch and personal connection, especially with us at Grai, when we're trying to, grow the studio, meet new potential partners, or even that face-to-face investor meeting. And just one last thing to add before we move on. There's an actually upside to this, and I probably everyone expects that, but what the pandemic also created was a massive opportunity for entrepreneur startups from anywhere outside major hubs to be able to fundraise. So if there's one good side of the pandemic, if I can put it this way, would be that this really allowed maybe underrepresented founders, or the ones that didn't have the opportunity maybe to be in front of those major VCs, suddenly to be able to invest online, because also VCs had to adapt, right? I've met a lot of venture capital firms that they were not passive during the last year. They actively invested in new startups. So always look at the bright side.
They adapted quickly. So that's the secret sauce. Ahmad, we met in one of the startup weekends before. Then I met him with you. He was assisting you on the way and the route to meeting with me in the hotel. Ahmad is asking how venture studios shorten the path to exit for startups.
Good question. Yeah, knowing Ahmad is always asking good question, but maybe complex questions that we might not be able to answer even for the rest of the session, but I'll be short. Well, so one thing, and this is not just me talking about this stats. Luckily, we have organizations that are doing this research for us, so I can name it on podcasts like this one. I believe was GSSN that released a white paper last year, and that paper got a lot of attention because we're starting to see the first studios producing really great results, right? So that's one of the things everyone maybe, or some investors might be skeptical because it's such a new model that you're just seeing now some of the successes coming out. So when I read that paper, I remember that interestingly enough, startups coming out of venture studios, they have twice as fast of a growth path to seed stage, and even 3 times as fast to Series A compared to a startup that was built externally out in the wild, right? How we say it. So immediately you can see that the fact that you have almost everything put together, right? All the resources that you need as a company when you're getting started, from marketing support, HR, financials, accounting, design, everything together. This really saves the founder time, space to just focus on the business and drive it forward. But also it depends how you build the startup. So for example, at Grai, when we do work with external partners, of course, it's in our best interest and for them as well to target a short-term exit. That helps, of course, the partner take over the company. They can decide if they want to run it externally or incubate it inside the mother company. But this also creates exactly that learning curve that I mentioned earlier, to go as an entrepreneur through all stages of growth. So I think venture studios are doing a great job at potentially shortening the path to exits, also based on the successes that we've seen. And I think there's going to be many more. So potentially we should ask this question again, maybe in 2, 3, 5 years. I'm sure we'll get more results and more stats to look at then.
Yes, and more bunnies who are going to test it, right? So Ahmad has another question, and I'm sorry to say your name incorrectly. Ahmad, I know that Diana is saying the properly, I was so happy to say Diana Florescu because it's so easy with Eastern Europe, whereas with Ahmad, it's quite tricky. Are there any venture studio focusing on female founders and or femtech?
To be honest, not that I'm aware of. However, there's a lot more female at very senior levels inside these venture building studios. I mean, arguably, you could call, for example, Entrepreneur First a venture studio. It's a bit different, of course, from what we do at Grai, but it was regarded as a venture studio and is led by, there's 2 founders. There's a female founder. I think there are venture studios that could potentially, or they have this as a thesis for the startups that they're building. But as far as I'm aware, I don't know of any specialized female tech startup studios. There are specialized startup studios in industries, and we're seeing that more and more in entertainment, in media. RGA, for example, it's an accelerated type of venture studio. So that's maybe a discussion for another time, but they are a massive digital creative agency that also have a venture studio. And then we see more specialized ones, like in software, for example, or even deep tech or healthcare. But sorry to disappoint, I can't think of anyone that
well, the good thing is
tech.
The good thing is there are many venture studios with female leaders, and that definitely changes the mindset of many women who would like to see more role models leading the change. So, Ahmad, thank you very much for your questions. Let's go into Jamil's question. Hello, Diana. What are the variables that venture capital takes into consideration when choosing the company in which to invest?
I'm smiling because thank you, Jamil, for your question. I had this question, I think, came up in a panel discussion joined by another fellow venture studio, so the Heart and Mihao from Tar Heel Pathfinder, which is a venture studio and a venture capital firm at the same time. And one thing that I can imagine how confusing this is, and maybe I can rephrase or I can help rephrase the question, is that we as a venture studio, we don't invest in external companies. So even if we had a fund, we would prioritize the fund or the money allocation towards our company. So I think basically maybe what Jamil is you wanna ask is, how do you, let's say, prioritize the ideas or the companies that we are trying to build in the studio? And that's a really good question, and it's always a tricky one, isn't it? So we do have a scorecard, if you can call it this way, and we almost have or follow a due diligence process, almost like any investor. It's in our best interest to kill that idea really fast. So that's actually one of the key differentiators between, let's say, accelerators or startup founders building a startup by themselves. It's not in our interest to, for example, keep trying, or spend too much time on this, because that means a lot of time commitment, which equals money, right? So we look at opportunities where, not all the time, but most of the time, we look at opportunities where we can exit or partner with a larger corporation. So we are on the lookout of opportunities or, of course, some of the needs or customer problems or challenges that our corporate partners voice to us. They are important to us. And then we look at the market sizing of that opportunity, who else is out there, how many companies, startups, how are the startups looking like from a business model, what about the fundraising or the exits, and which markets that's been done before. So this, everything that I'm mentioning right now, compiles a scorecard, which we kind of take through every idea that we create. And then just one last thing to say, we almost never work on an idea that or a startup that it's already existing in the market, or we feel that it's just too competitive, right? So sometimes we do look at different markets. So for example, Australia or the US, and it's a good inspirational source for us, what can be done here. But we take this approach, it's very rigorous for us, because as I said, we have to just move really fast with ideas. Usually we don't spend more than 3 months, even less, I would say. It takes us about a month just to like have an idea tested, validated, and then decide whether we want to proceed forward or not.
So are you looking for any projects right now, or is it usually startups that approach you? I mean, Grai Ventures.
We already have 3 startups that we've started at Grai. So these are our own companies, our own ideas. There are different stages of growth. One exciting project. So one of the companies is an e-commerce. It's a marketplace that it's redefining the gifting experience. We are launching this new business next month. So that's really exciting. Then we have a different company in a completely new space in sustainability, green energy, which we're really excited about. But it's quite different, and that requires a completely different approach that really keeps us busy. It's also fair to say that we are a team of 8 people, and it's probably, we could probably run about 2-3 companies of such in parallel. So we're almost kind of reaching that capacity at the moment. The moment we will be able to fundraise for the startups, then we will welcome new ideas, obviously, in the studio. However, we do work with startups in other capacities. So I did mention, I think in the beginning, we sometimes advise or help with fundraising. There are times when, for example, we could provide with go-to-market strategies. This is actually what Grai's core function is about. Our expertise lies in commercials, business development, and marketing, and we have other adjacent functions. So right now, if there's any startup listening in that, for example, would be interested to scale also internationally, we have very close connections with Singapore, as well as Japan, Southeast Asia, or the US. If they would require maybe just an expert view on their business model or the startup overall, absolutely, I think we can always consider that. There's more information on our website as well, on graiventures.com, for anyone interested.
Well, we'll follow on that, but before you follow, let's go into Olga's another question. So what is the principal unique selling point for a venture builder studio?
It depends. I think it depends. It's almost like any startup would have a unique selling point, isn't it? Maybe let's think about Grai, because that's a practical example, isn't it? I think unique selling point for us, it's the sort of the function, or let's say call it a package if you like, that we would provide the moment we create a company, right? So starting with the idea, validating the idea. When it's ready to go to market, we will look to hire a CEO and a CTO, but Grai fundamentally stays there. So we act as almost as a co-founder, if you like, providing that the important resources that you need at the start of your venture. I would also say is more of a characteristic than a unique selling point, but we do focus on software primarily. So I mentioned that some startup studios, they have they're specialized in certain industries or business models. We are industry agnostic, for example. However, we do prefer to work with software. That's a market and a business model that we understand, and we've done it before. And I think the unique selling point, as far as I know, I would love to be challenged, but there's no other venture studio of such in Romania, but also in Eastern Europe. I think Poland is represented by a couple of venture studios, and of course, there's many more in the West. But we don't have these organizations in Central Eastern Europe, and also our approach to creating these companies, I think it's quite unique, and it has a blend of internal ideation, working with universities, so university spin-outs, but also looking and building that function potentially to partner up with corporations as well. So it's a three-in-one venture studio.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Olga, for your challenging question to Diana.
Yeah, I see people are asking really, really tough questions. So good questions.
I know indeed. As a founder of a mission to run startups, the unique startup cohort built in Toruń, the birthplace of Nicolaus Copernicus, I know that many people are just all puzzled about, all these hackathons, incubators, and accelerators, and all these buzzwords are really confusing. So it's very good to have you here and be our expert and answer all these questions. So let's go into how venture studio makes money, or does it?
Well, we should. Otherwise, I think we will be out of the market, out of business very soon. Venture, I think. There's multiple ways of making money, of course, with venture building. But I think as a successful venture builder, almost as a VC, right? You want your portfolio of companies to raise money and potentially to have a successful exit, where based on the exits, of course, you would gain some proceeds, which you'll be able to further invest in your business. There, as I said, there's multiple ways of potentially making revenue alongside, because an exit could take, right now, at the rate I see unicorns coming to market, just before our talk, Beata, I was actually looking at Doc Planet. Just they raised an additional round, which makes them officially a unicorn. Just a week later, after another Polish company that announced their $1 billion valuation, which is crazy, right? But let's assume that an exit would happen, let's say in 4 or 5 years from now. Obviously, you do have to sustain the operations of your venture studio. So in our case, when the startup goes out of the venture studio as a spin-off, then our, let's say, resources or services, if you like, are almost treated as an external provider, right? At a discounted rate for sure, because it's in our best interest. But we do receive additional revenue from the company, so there are recharges. This is how we call them. And then it also it could be well, if you do get a profit along the years, you could also take dividends as well. But these two, the recharges on the startups and potentially fees for sitting on the board as well as a member, and the proceeds that you'll be able to make as part of those exits, that's one way, right? So, or these are basically two streams of revenue. It's a pretty vast question, because it goes down to your business model, of course, as a studio, because there are studios that are built primarily to create companies, let's say, for larger corporations. So that's immediately a transactional relationship, right? So there's maybe no equity involved as a studio. You wouldn't necessarily look at any short-term exits primarily, but you would price per project, and that's fine. That's an approach as well. It's just not something that we do at Grai, and I think we're way better off co-creating and potentially also co-investing with these partners alongside.
So are you planning to launch a hackathon or any other way of attracting these startups with brilliant ideas to your venture studio?
Probably not a hackathon. I would say that the way this works, we would probably, so we're fortunate to be part of different organizations that allow us to have access to a really good talent. The moment we are sure we validated a concept or an idea internally, then we would look for that potential CEO to join. Of course, there are startups that do reach out to us for potentially other support, as I mentioned, fundraising or just purely consulting on their business, and that's absolutely fine. But we have to be, I think it is the nature of a venture studio, we have to be quite restrictive. So we wouldn't, let's say, put on a big show to get the startups. We are very selective in our approach, and it's usually the other way around. So we're the ones kind of like chasing down the right people and the right companies to work with.
Chasing down the unicorns. So
yeah, we have to be realistic though. So we're not unicorns anytime soon. But yeah.
Well, the core concept of Mission to Run our startup community was to bring everybody to the table, because there are so many ways to make entrepreneurship and help the economy grow, that this pie is enormous. The size of it is so big. And tech is the driver for all organizations now. We need all our networks to be prepared, including Venture Studio, and attract these startups and make sure that they adapt quickly. So I've got a couple of questions. We are 10 minutes to the end of the show. I just wanted to ask you, are you working on any exciting new project right now?
Apart from Grai, which takes 150% of our time, and I'm sure if Stefani is listening in, he knows what I'm saying. The long nights, long days, but we absolutely love it. I think there's a couple of exciting projects within Grai. So the new business, the e-commerce platform that we are working on, I'm really excited about that. It has a lot of potential to redefine the gifting experience and provide a much more digital experience to users, but also our retail partners. So that is coming up next month, and I'll be able to share more. We do also focus a lot on fundraising. So that's maybe something for any investor listening in as well. Our approach has changed a lot over the last 9-12 months when I officially joined Grai, and it's been a really steep learning curve. And I think this is always going to be the case with venture building models. So we're going to continue to learn a lot. But right now, we are looking not to raise a fund by all means, but we are raising an initial round of investment in Grai. So if we can call it a project, that would be a project. And then there's another adjacent to investment as well. We've been very active at educating the market in Europe about a new investment type, which is called media for equity, which essentially what that means is that a startup, especially a direct-to-consumer company, that already validated their business and they're ready to scale and get in front of the mass market, they would partner with TV stations or media broadcasters in a way that they would give away equity, and the media partner would provide them with airtime or media space. And it's a model that is picking up and it's been growing over the last decade. Again, pre-established in the West, not so established or known in Europe or even in Southeast Asia. So that's something that we've been working on for the last few months. There's more exciting updates coming up on that topic. There's a white paper we released as well in May this year. So it's on the website. It's a media for equity white paper. And that's again going back to our almost the scope, the vision we created at Grai. We're trying to build the right function to help the startups grow, and potentially media for equity could also be a way of further investing in our companies. And lastly, because that's how we met Beata, I do have to say a few words as well about Wolf Summit, because I'm just super, super excited about the growth that we've achieved with the summit in the last year. And Mike he's been sharing a lot of interesting updates as well on his LinkedIn. Just today, we put up the agenda for the edition coming up in 27 days officially. So really counting those days. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be probably the biggest edition by now. And of course, nobody forgot what's been happening for the last 12 months. And it's been a tough year for the event industry. However, we just marched on, and my involvement with the summit, as you know, so I've always been working really closely with Mike and being on the board and helping with the overall company plans and strategy moving forward. And it's been a spectacular year. We've helped over 40 other partners, really large organizations as well, including Panasonic and UN, create their own events alongside creating Wolf Summit. And there's really exciting things coming up in 2022 with the summit, where Grai is also a partner. And it's a new conference that we are announcing.
That's really fantastic. And I want to know the sauce you're eating in your diet, because this doesn't look like the normal 7 days week.
Yeah, I know. It's not. It just, you don't get much sleep. That's absolutely fine. I think I'm gonna get enough sleep maybe when I retire, whenever that's gonna happen, if ever. But yeah, no, you're right.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of work.
I'll be sleeping in my grave. That's
true.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's when you're passionate about something, you just keep on doing things and you don't mind the fact that it's really dark, everybody's sleeping around you. So
that's right.
let's go into our favorite questions. I mean, everybody's waiting for that moment when you're gonna share what is your favorite life lesson quote and how did it shape your life.
Yes. I do have, I think, as probably everyone else. And to be honest with you, I can't remember who said this or how I came across it, but I feel like it really defines everything I've done. And the quote sounds like this: "If opportunity doesn't knock, then build a door." And I like it, and I think it really resonated over the last 6-7 years of my career. And that's because I've always stepped in. I've stepped in roles that were not defined. I've always worked in startups, all stages of their growth. So from the early stages to potentially seed or even later growth stage, Series A. And I always had to shape my own role. I always had to hustle. I think I'm the true definition of a hustler, and I love it. I like to shape up things. I like to have that autonomy in my role, and to be able to work. I think I've realized maybe the leadership style as well that I have is just it's within, right? So you can lead from the front, you can lead from the back. I've always been one with the team and really like working alongside people. And if there's no opportunity, then just they just build a door.
Bravo, sister. Amen to that. And I can definitely say that, everything comes to those who hustle while they wait. So we've been waiting for that favorite person you would take with you on a private breakfast. Who would it be and why?
That was this is a really tough question because I had many people pop into mind, but I'm gonna be biased because maybe I just finished reading her book, so that kind of like maybe that stayed in my mind. But and by all means, I'm
Show
not
us the book.
political. Well,
Do you
it's
have
actually
it?
just for
No.
I do have it. It's just I'm just gonna quickly tilt my screen. It's covered.
Yay!
It's
Yep.
it's Michelle Obama, and I was about to say I'm not political at all. Almost like her, actually. I don't. I don't. I've never been into politics, so that conversation is not going there. But I've read her book, and I've just been really inspired. I've been inspired by her life. I've been inspired not just because she's a woman of color, but just her determination right from the start and where she started. Right, she started in a very modest family, and where she's got where she's right now. Her career, her progression, her support as well during the presidency. I think she's just a role model, and I think she's quite modest as well. So I would love, I would maybe not breakfast because I'm not a breakfast person, but maybe like lunch or dinner. I would love that.
Well, we had breakfast in Warsaw and you didn't complain much, but
I know. Well, I mean, I'm trying to make it. Yeah, I'm always making exceptions. Maybe as well this time. Yes.
exactly. If she's got time in her diary, why not? So, Michelle Obama, if you're listening to us, Diana
I'm
wants to
sure.
invite you to breakfast. And where would you take her to?
Mm, this is funny. I've never been to Danube Delta, and maybe that would be a very special, almost a quite unique breakfast because on the Danube Delta you're probably just going to have fish all the time, but it's a quite unique place in Europe, and it's just 3 hours drive from where I am right now. And I believe it or not, I've never been. It's special. It's unique. It's where Danube River falls into the Black Sea, and it creates a gorgeous, environment. So maybe there. I would love to go there. I don't know if she's gonna
And
travel all the way here, but who knows? Maybe on a private jet or something.
absolutely, probably listening to Strauss, beautiful Danube waltz. Who knows? Anyway, that's all, folks. We have reached the end of episode 32 with Diana Florescu. speaking from Romania, beautiful country. I ought to visit. If you're going there, make sure you tap into her contact list. It's enormous. Venture Studio, adapting quickly, that's her mantra, and staying and hustling. To stay updated and ensure you never miss another positivity hack delivered, please follow Women on IT and hack the future with us. I would like to send special thanks and regards to our lovely chatters today, who are Olga Vasina, Amat Breire, Jamil Navarroza, and I would like to also invite everyone. Next week we are joined by Alec Watson, and we are going to learn how to define your visual identity. If you focus on positives, the positives get more positive. As always, our positivity quote comes from Positive Thinking Only and goes, look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude, as Maya Angelou would say. Today is your day to hack the future, hack the positivity you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Beata.